Welcome to Education Perspectives. I am your host, Liza Holland. This is a podcast that explores the role of education in our society from a variety of lenses. Education needs to evolve to meet the needs of today and the future. Solving such huge issues requires understanding. Join me as we begin to explore the many perspectives of education. I am so glad to welcome Renee Boss to Education Perspectives. Renee has been an educator for 25 years. She earned her National Board Certification in Adolescent and Young Adult English Language Arts in 2007 and renewed it again in 2017. Renee taught high school English for 12 years before stepping aside to work as a consultant and program manager for KDE and Central Kentucky Educational Cooperative for a total of 8 years. She returned to the classroom after borrowing a classroom for her NBCT renewal because she realized how much she missed teaching. Currently, Renee teaches English at Woodford County High School, where she also serves as department co-chair and STLP advisor. Over the past 10 years, Renee has worked in various roles supporting NBCTs in Kentucky. She was elected to the Kentucky NBCT Board of Directors in 2021. In addition to her work supporting NBCTs, Renee also serves on other teacher leadership roles. She was part of the Prichard Committee Teacher Leader Steering Committee and the 2021 Prichard Committee Teacher Fellow. In the 2022-23 school year, Renee was selected as a teacher leader for the UK-JHFE Holocaust Education Initiative and was also selected to work on her district's Deeper Learning team. All right. So I am so incredibly happy to welcome Renee Boss to Education Perspective. She's been a bit of a mentor, having gone down this road before, and just really appreciate you taking the time to tell us a little bit about your perspective since you are back deep in it, right in the classroom. Welcome, Renee.
Thank you, Liza. I'm really glad to be here and talk with you.
Well, I wanted to start like I have with other guests, to talk about your perception of why do we do this grand experiment of educating our people in society? Why do you think that's important to us as a society, a state, a community, et cetera?
I think education can make us better people. For me, humanity's at the base of what we're doing. And I know there's a lot of talk about, well, we need to prepare students for this, that, or the other, but this is the life we're in right now. And this is students' lives right now. And what's happening right now matters as much as what happens to them in the future. And so for me, becoming educated or teaching students is about the human aspects of it and how we learn to be better listeners, better empathizers, more curious explorers and readers and writers and scientists and historians, and just have hopefully a curiosity for continuing that learning throughout our lives. And I know that saying, lifelong learner has become a little bit cliche now, but seriously, if we can leave our students with nothing else, if we light something in them that makes them want to keep learning and improving as a person and being the best person they can be for society, then our society is better for it.
Hear, hear. It's, the reasons that it was originally started as a societal experiment have kind of changed. And lifelong learner, if you're not a lifelong learner today, you're in trouble because we're actually training kids for jobs that don't even exist yet. So one of my favorite quotes from a person who was president of a big company. He said, I just need people who can learn, unlearn, and relearn and be happy doing it. And I thought, what a wonderful testimony to what kind of workers we need in the future.
Exactly.
So tell us, what drew you to education in the first place? You've had a unique journey.
Yes, I didn't really plan to be a teacher. That wasn't really something that I looked for or even ever thought about. There's no history of educators in my family. I am a first generation college grad, pretty proud of that. And I know my family's proud of me as well. And so for me, I was finishing up a degree in psychology at a private liberal arts college and was drawn to psychology because of the human aspects of it. I guess you'll hear me say that a few times, but I really liked the counseling and relating to people side of it. And I did an internship my senior year of college. And my internship was at a learning center for high school students. And that learning center was attached to the public school. I went to college in Georgia. And so students could take this elective at the learning center. And so I was tasked with teaching them some elective psychology classes and relationship building and mindset ideas. And when I was doing that, I realized, oh, this is something that I could do. I actually really like this. I enjoyed working with the students. I enjoyed planning for what they should learn in the lessons. And so I immediately, after I graduated, went back and got a master's degree at that same school in Georgia to teach, and then started my teaching career in North Carolina, in Cherokee, North Carolina, on the Qualla Boundary, and taught there for 6 years before we moved to Kentucky. So that's kind of the getting started story.
That's fantastic. Kentucky is incredibly blessed to have you. And so I know that you have enjoyed the classroom, but you've also taken a couple of little detours here and there. Could you tell our audience a little bit about some of the other work that you've done outside of direct teaching?
Certainly. So when we did move to Kentucky, I taught in Lexington at one of the high schools here, Bryan Station, actually, when I first got started. And I did that for about 6 years and then looked at a position at the Kentucky Department of Education. And I spent the next 4 or 5 years at the Kentucky Department of Education as a literacy consultant and then a manager of the academic core branch. And that was at the time that Common Core was coming out, and we had a lot of different education reforms around 2009 that I was part of at the State Department of Education, and then kind of wanted to get a little bit closer to classrooms and left and work for nonprofits. I was part of an experimental nonprofit, the Fund for Transforming Education in Kentucky, and we existed for about 4 years. And then that organization dissolved, and I did some other work for CKEC before ultimately deciding it was time to teach again. So I've been teaching again for the last 5 years.
That is marvelous. Tell us a little bit more about what that decision-making point was about, that you really needed to get back into the classroom.
So I think primarily it happened when I was renewing my national board certification. Right before I left the classroom the first time, I had just obtained my national board certification, maybe a year and a half before that, and it was a kind of a lifelong dream. I didn't even know that rank 1 was a thing in Kentucky around certification. That wasn't even something I knew about because I was from out of state. I just had this professional goal of becoming national board certified. And after I certified, they were like, oh, well, now you're qualified for rank 1. I'm like, oh, well, what's that? And anyway, it kind of worked out for me. And so, some of the learning and the reflection that goes with the national board process, that I'm still pretty involved with different national board initiatives in our state. And, I used a lot of the skills that I learned in seeking my certification. I used a lot of those skills in my new jobs at KDE and CKC and the Fund for Transforming Education. And that was great. But, when you're doing national boards, the major part of it is thinking about how what you do impacts student learning. And you're always showing the evidence of how whatever you're doing impacts student learning. And, that reflectiveness that comes in doing those other jobs was great, but it wasn't the same. So in 2017, it was time for me to renew my national board certification. And I didn't have a classroom of my own. I was busy doing this other work that was very fulfilling and that I enjoyed immensely. I'm so grateful that I had that as the other work as part of my journey as well. But I borrowed this classroom of a friend in Lexington, and I realized, oh, yeah, kind of forgot what this was like. Now, I had been teaching a little bit here and there. I taught a little bit for the University of Kentucky, some literacy classes and things like that, but that is not the same at all is having a classroom full of students day in and day out. And so within the next year after doing my renewal, I looked for an opportunity to get back into teaching. And mixed emotions a little bit because I was in the middle of a project at CKC, but it felt like it was time for me to get back and take everything that I had learned doing these other jobs and teach again. So
marvelous. So now that you're back in the classroom, right down at ground zero, as it were, what do you love about what you do?
What I love about what I do, is the day in and the day out with students. I like having conversations. I like talking about what we read and what we write and how that impacts us as humans and how all of the skills of reading and writing. I'm an English teacher. I don't think I said that. How those skills take us everywhere in life. We have to be able to communicate well with whatever job we do later and even right now. And so I would say that what I love is the day in and the day out. I really also, and it's not really common, but I really also love planning and working with curriculum. And that's something that I've done my entire career as a teacher. And then in some of these other jobs that I had, my actual skill set is around planning lessons and curriculum and working very closely with that. And I love that because it's always exciting to think about what types of questions and projects you might propose to students to get them to show you what they know and can do. So, those are my favorite parts about teaching, being with a student and having the lessons and planning the lessons.
Well, and it goes back to those relationships that you were talking about before and how powerful that can be because it's not like a drop-in. You really get to know these kids, and that's just awesome. Understand in your bio that you were selected to work on your district's deeper learning team. Can you tell us a little bit about that type of work? Because I think that most of us are not terribly aware of it.
Well, we're just getting started. We've been working as a team for the last maybe 2.5 months, and we work in collaboration with a team at the University of Kentucky. CKEC spearheaded a few sessions for us as well. So we're in the exploratory phase. The last time we were together, we were doing some work around what a graduate should look like from our district. And so we're beginning those conversations. And my understanding is that we will kind of spearhead those conversations with our colleagues when we get to that next step, but we're not quite there yet. But it's been really interesting to have the conversations about what we think students need to know and be able to do in life and to distill that down into some sticking points, so to speak. So we're really just getting started with it. In some ways, it's interesting because it feels like I'm coming full circle. I started teaching before NCLB, and so a long time ago, and before a lot of the reforms that we've seen. And I started teaching with project-based learning, in 1998. So to see that as something that people are saying, oh, this is what we need to be doing. And at least when we're saying that, there's an acknowledgement that it's not something new. I think it's just kind of fallen by the wayside as a regular way of doing school. But I'm glad to see it come full circle in my career because that's right where I started.
Well, that means you'll be well fitted out to be able to bring those to the students. And I think that's a lot of this change in education is getting away from content and tests, high stakes test scores, and really getting back to what do you need to learn to be a productive citizen in our society today? And that deeper learning really seems to be kind of hitting that target, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, I'm excited about it too. And I have all high hopes for the best with it.
Well, speaking of high hopes, what about challenges? I talk to a lot of different people within education, and it tends to be a little overly siloed, where one person does not really realize what the impact that a decision they make has on another person in a different area. So what are some of your challenges or obstacles that you're facing in doing teaching the way you'd like to do it?
Probably the biggest obstacle is time and the structure of our school day. And I would say that's really the biggest obstacle. I feel like to do school well, we would be more interdisciplinary. It wouldn't be 70 minutes in one class and then a bell rings and you go to the next class and you start something all over again. I would love to see it more interdisciplinary. And so I would say that is one of the biggest challenges. The time in the day that we have to plan the learning experiences that we know our students need is really limited. And because there is a teacher shortage, a lot of times, even in our little hour, maybe 70 minutes of planning, teachers have to cover for other classes because there's not enough teachers, there's not enough subs. So I would say the teacher shortage and the time and structure of the day are two of my biggest challenges that I experience on a regular basis.
We've actually talked about the teacher shortage on several of these podcasts. It really inhibits teachers' ability to do things the way that they really want them done, or forces them to do it outside of work time that they're not getting paid for. So huge challenge. Go out there if you can and be a substitute teacher for the short term.
Yes, that would definitely help. And then hopefully we can, think differently about the way we schedule and design the day of learning for students too. I feel like, especially coming out of online learning with COVID that we had for a couple years, students have some different expectations for us, and we have an opportunity to rise to that challenge that they've given us with how they can learn and operate and how independent they can be and what kinds of experiences we can provide that maybe are a better use of the school day, which, then gets into all the issues of seat time and days in school and all those things. But it really comes back to the time.
Well, obviously, it's people that make decisions on schedules and all that kind of a thing. And so what would you like decision makers to know as they're making decisions for how school is run here in Kentucky, or even at the district or school level? What would you like for them to know?
I would like decision makers to know that we don't have to do it the way we've always been doing it. In the time that I've been an educator, and I've been doing this for 25 years now, and we've run the school day pretty much the same way for all those years. I just don't think that it has to be done that way. I think there are better options. I feel like we should explore those options with an open mind. I think that's the main thing I would like decision makers to know. We don't have to do it one way because we've always done it that way.
Excellent recommendation. So you are actually involved in communicating about education and to your peers and whatnot with a podcast. And so I would love for you to let our listeners know about your podcast and what it kind of covers.
Thank you. So during COVID, a group of us came together, teachers from around the state, and decided that we needed to do something to support the well-being of teachers. And so we started a podcast titled the Teacher Check-In Podcast, and we completed 2 seasons, and we'll hopefully be getting season 3 launched officially in November. But we cover topics such as time constraints and how to deal with that when you do have some limited options. We've talked about teacher wellness in terms of how you work with a mentor and a mentee. We've had several guests, but some authors and famous people who've talked about how to be mentally strong, and not with toxic positivity, but with true mental fortitude. And we just hope that the podcast and the conversations really promote an idea of remembering to not just say, well, take care of yourself and here, have a yoga room. Nothing against yoga. I love it. But the idea that we really need to have open conversations and kind of destigmatize an idea related to mental health. So we're caring for our students all day, but also caring for ourselves and for each other. So the podcast has mostly been for an audience of educators. We have had a couple of episodes with administrators where we've talked about how we can do things together. And we ended last season talking to a couple of students actually about what they thought their teachers needed and how their teachers could help them think about mental wellness as individuals.
Boy, talk about needed topic areas for, especially through this pandemic piece. I think everybody is really exhausted. Teachers, parents, students, all of us. So that is a super support for your fellow educators there. I'm kind of curious, anything specific that came up from students that kind of was interesting to you?
Well, something specific that came up that I took action on for the coming year was that I was asking students, what about where do they feel most comfortable in the building? And they said, number one, they felt most comfortable when teachers were welcoming, regardless of their status and their identity and how they related. So when teachers would have stickers welcoming all populations on their doors, that made them feel comfortable and welcome. I already had one of those stickers, but the other thing that they said that I took action on was that they really liked it when we didn't have harsh lighting. So just things related to a building. And I was able to secure some different lighting options that made the room feel less like it was going to give students a headache. So that was something that really resonated with me. But mostly it was about, really feeling welcome regardless of what their backgrounds or beliefs were.
That makes an incredible amount of sense. And I tell you, you taking action on those things is just really, really important, because I don't think students can be open to learning unless they feel safe and they feel welcome and they feel comfortable. So that's a huge thing. So I appreciate you sharing that. So tell me, do you have a story or a favorite memory about your time in education that you'd like to share?
I've been thinking about this for a few days since you said you might ask me about it. And I have so many favorites. So I will just tell you for sure that the things that have been my favorite have been those that have been opportunities where students could, for lack of a better word, perform. So performance-based learning, it's been interdisciplinary. So at my school in North Carolina, this was eons ago now, but we created a Renaissance festival when we were reading Shakespeare, and the students put it on and the community attended, and it was really good publicity for our school. And not that it was about the publicity, it was not. But the reason that was good is that I was on the reservation and we did not always get good press. And so the fact that the students put on something that got positive press in our regional news was really rewarding, because they were shining and they were being interviewed. And it was beautiful. And, there were some other opportunities like that in Kentucky when I got here as well. But every time that I feel like it's been my favorite story, it's been something that's been interdisciplinary. And so I'm always hoping for more of that. And, sometimes you feel like you have the time and energy and support. Sometimes you don't, but those are my favorites, I think.
Oh, that's a great answer. And, I think that with our new United We Learn effort here in Kentucky, maybe we can tap into our community and our parents and folks that support education to try to take some of that lift away from teachers, not completely, but, to be there, to be extra support and all that kind of a thing. I think that's a wonderful opportunity to bring the community in. I mean, that's part of why I started this podcast in the first place, was talking to people who are not in education. So often people they didn't have any clue whatsoever. They felt honestly intimidated by education. And we kind of have edu-speak out there sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so that's a fabulous way to have engaged community and whatnot. And I bet you it made Shakespeare a lot more entertaining for your students.
I think so.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time today. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think might be a fun thing to share?
So super fun thing. If I hadn't said that about the interdisciplinary learning, I would have also mentioned my work as a mentor. I've had the most amazing opportunity in my career to mentor incredible humans and teachers. And one of my first mentors in Kentucky years ago in 2016 was named the Kentucky Teacher of the Year, Ashley Lamb Sinclair. And I was so happy that I cried. It was just the coolest thing. And I think, we clicked as mentor and mentee, and we've stayed in touch all these years. And she just wrote a book, and I'm so proud of her and so excited for her. But she wrote a book titled From Underestimated to Unstoppable. And it's about change archetypes that teachers might be, and the change that you can make in class in education, depending on your particular change archetype. So it was just released. It came out like this month. So just a little bit ago. And so I'm just really excited about it. And I think everybody should know about it and read it. It was published by ASCD. So all the people who are ASCD members, I think, receive the book, but then it's for sale as well for anybody.
Awesome. We will link that in the show notes so that more and more people can access that wisdom. Thank you so much. And
Definitely.
Kudos to her. That's
Yes,
awesome.
she's quite a change maker herself. So
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me and give us a little window, into the classroom there. And I am looking forward to your next episodes of Teacher Check-In to be able to kind of increase my learning. And I think that probably even some of that mental health stuff might be a wonderful thing for me to listen to. Thanks so
thank
much,
you,
Renee.
Liza. I really appreciate the time that you took to talk with me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Education Perspectives. Feel free to share your thoughts on our Facebook page. Let us know which education perspectives you would like to hear or share. Please subscribe and share with your friends.